I don't want to start the podcast on too down a note, but we were overlooked in the British Podcast Awards.
Okay, who do we blame?
Yeah.
Let's not reflect and look at constructive feedback, but let's blame.
Do we want to just look at the winners? Is that what we
Not
want?
really. Oh, so what can we learn? Is that the way you want to look at it?
Yeah.
I don't know. Podcast of the year was Press Play Turn On. Have you heard of that one?
No.
You should. What can I ask? What it's about?
I don't know.
Okay. If Tom, if Chris says it, you search it, and then if you get banned, then we know it's it might be inappropriate content.
So the listeners.
I'm not saying what that one is.
Really?
Through interviews with hot-tongued audio porn creators and their disabled smut searchers, Amelia explores how audio porn could be good as well as sexy. There you go.
Wow.
Okay, well that's podcast of the year.
No wonder that one. Chris, are you looking at podcast of the year or just your list of favourite podcasts?
Yeah.
Well, it's tricky. So, like, podcast champion is The Rest Is Politics. The Listener's Choice Award is Help I Sexted My Boss.
This is your
There's a
personality,
theme.
Chris.
There's clearly a theme here, isn't there?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so would we come under comedy? Probably not. Best comedy podcast was From the Oast House, the Alan Partridge podcast.
Worthy winner. Yeah.
Arts and culture. Are we under arts and culture?
Well, paint them.
The Joni Mitchell story. Probably not beating that, are we? I'm looking at sports. Okay, the best sports podcast is The Athletic FC. Are we a sports podcast? I don't know. I don't think there's really any categories for us there. I hope that we never get entered into best sex and relationship podcast.
One can only hope.
Yeah.
Oh, well, on that topic, should we play the intro?
Yeah, let's do that. Hello, everyone. Welcome to New Dice Please, the bite-sized Blood Bowl podcast brought to you by the people at Blood Bowl Live. My name is Chris. I am joined, as always, by Mr. Scott Bryan. Scott, what's your favourite sauce?
Favourite sauce is brown.
Cracking. And joining us, as always, Mr. Tom Hovell. Tom, favourite sauce?
Horseradish.
I mean, but I nearly asked favourite condiment, which you could have given the same answers to.
I would say horseradish is more of a condiment than a sauce.
When did it become a
Being
sauce?
pedantic.
When did it become a condiment and not a sauce?
I would say it's a condiment rather than a sauce. It doesn't really pour, does it? Because I wanted to go gravy, which I would say isn't a condiment, but is a sauce.
Ooh.
I think we've got a whole new podcast that we could run here, condiment or sauce, where we just debate whether it's a condiment or a sauce.
It's very philosophical.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
There's a Magic the Gathering card game there, right there.
Well, this week we're not talking condiments or sauces. Instead, we are talking about redrafting. We are currently sat 3-4 weeks, maybe 4, I think. 4 weeks away from the start of our new season of the Advanced Dragons Blood Bowl League Season 8. And on the hot topic is whether you should or shouldn't redraft your team from a previous season. So we're going to talk about, firstly, how do you redraft? What is a redraft? And then also, is it worth it? Is it worth redrafting? Does it work? What is the point? Let's start then with what a redraft is. So Scott and Tom, I will remind you of the rules of our redraft. So redrafting is basically bringing back a team that you have played in a previous season. So they come back, all of your players or some of your players, whoever you can afford, comes back for the next season, and you get to spend a little bit more money normally on your team because you've earned money over the previous season through your wins and things like that. So the book, which I've got here in front of me, tells you how you can redraft, and the rules that we follow are pretty much the same as the rules in the book. So when you are starting your team, you normally start with a 1 million budget. For redrafting, your budget is determined on how you did in the previous season. So for us, and as it is in the book, 20,000 gold pieces for each game that you played, an additional 20 for each win, an additional 10 for each draw. And that's it. There's normally a cap in place, and for us, there is a cap in place. You also include your treasury from the previous season as well. Any treasury you've got left over gets included on that. A cap of 1.3 million is what we have in place, and that's kind of standard. I know some leagues do it slightly differently. So the maximum that you will be at is 1.3 compared to a new team only getting 1 million. What is the possible problem with that? Well, every player that you bring back, you pay their base cost, you pay for any additional skill, and you pay 20,000 per season they have played in. So if you've had a player and you redraft him 3 or 4 times, he's costing you 60, 80,000 pounds, 80,000 gold per season that he's played, or to bring back for that full season. So it's more expensive, but you can bring back some players with some additional skills. The question is, Scott, Tom, is it worth it?
Quick answer, depends.
Great. Fantastically vague start this week.
So just to clarify, I'm bringing back humans. I played them last season. And to talk about those calculations of costs and stuff, I'm bringing back a human lineman with block, and he is 70k rather than the standard 50, because he's 50 plus the 20 because he's a redraft. I think.
Is he a lineman with block?
He's a lineman with block.
Did you choose block or did you random block?
I chose it. Now
so
that's
he'll cost you 90 because he'll cost you 20 for the chosen skill and then another 20 for bringing him back another season.
Right, because that means tour play screwed up.
Great. I'll have a look at that afterwards, but
I won't be bringing back a lineman with block then. No, because it's basically saying that it's 50 plus 20k.
Yeah, on tour play, Tom, it won't show the what they call the agent's fee. So that extra 20k for redrafting and for a season, you won't see that on tour play. So tour play is correct, my friend.
Oh, okay. So it has taken it right. Okay, that's good for you. So I've completely gutted my treasury anyway on it. But
so I'm looking at your roster. You've brought back quite a few players. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players that you've brought back in this first season. Yeah. So what was the budget you were starting with then? Because there's a cap of 1.3, but you're not necessarily going to have 1.3 depending on how last season was. So how were you starting at 1.3? Was that where your treasury got to?
Yeah, got to that. Got to 1.3. So I've basically, and the whole reason I'm doing this is, again, I'm one of the things as to why I said maybe as to whether to redraft. I think humans are one of those teams that are a multi-season team to get the most out of them. Unless you're very fortunate on the dice and you manage to skill them up very quickly. I know you've got a lot of built-in skills with like the catchers and the throwers and the blitzers, but as everyone says, like the humans are a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none, and they don't have all those really, really good skills. So I've skilled them up last season with the view already to redraft them. I would say that other teams potentially you would go, right, they're a one season team. I don't want to redraft them again on that side of things.
Okay,
So
Scott. So Scott, where do you sit then? Because you are also redrafting into next season.
I am. I think as a coach, you've got to look at it from your individual perspective to say, do you want to continue the journey with this team? And are there individual key players who meet your strategy and the need of the team? Or do you just want a change of your team? Do you just fancy something else, which is, maybe the new team launched? So, for example, in season 7 just gone, we saw a number of known teams. I suspect for season 8, we'll see a lot more Chaos Dwarf teams start to appear ready for season 9. So you have that flexibility, but it does help where you have teams who may be taking a longer while to get that. So, for example, I've taken Wood Elves. Wood Elves, to get them to where I want to get them is, I've always looked at them as a 2-season build. Because you start, they are relatively expensive, and we know they can be relatively squishy, which is what happened to me at the start of season 7. So I'm happy to do that. For me, when you're looking as a coach to redraft or not to redraft, agree with what Tom said, which wasn't, it was one of those unfortunate, ambiguous answers because it has ambiguous. It's based on your individual need. So what is your need? And then you start with, okay, my need is, do I want to continue with this team? Do I want to develop them? Or am I just going to put them in the bin, start with something else? So what's the need? Then you look at the process. What do I want these players I'm going to redraft to do? Am I redrafting them just because they've got a skill, or have I got a specific role for that player? So for a good example, I have got rid of a couple of linemen, Wood Elf linemen with dodge. Not most, they were nice. Dodge on a Wood Elf lineman is not a bad thing. Very happy with that. Don't need them. I have 2 War Dancers who have specific builds, and they don't forget, a reminder to coaches, when you redraft, you carry over any unspent SPP. So that is ready now. So I have a War Dancer who is going to be my main ball attacker. So he is going to be the one going after it. And I have another War Dancer who is going to be sort of a deep strike in terms of a deep strike blitzer. So if I want to go after a specific player, I've got now a War Dancer with Mighty Blow and Tackle and Dodge, Block, Leap, etc. I have a catcher who is ready to go, and I have a leader. Everyone else can wait. I know what I need to do. So it's very much what's your need, what's the process, what do you need those specific players to do, and then do they have the tools, the skills to be able to do that as well, or do you have enough SPP ready? So that's the way I look at it. I'll come on later in the podcast, though, about at what point do you stop redrafting in the league when you think about synchronization across all teams? Because then you get into a bit of an arms race. If you've been redrafting 2 or 3 seasons, the tax prohibits you from continuing to just keep the same players and the cap, and that's good. But at what point, does a vanilla team, play against a team which is 1.2 million, which has, 4 or 5 players really, really skilled? At what point is the advantage? Now, the nice thing, yes, they can bring in the inducements. So you have to think about that trade-off as well as a coach. So, Tom, we talked about your team of humans. Yes, you can bring them all back, but are they the right players with the right skills? And of course, if you've got a 1.2 million team and someone's playing a fresh vanilla team, there's a few nice ones this year, look good on paper to start with. They're going to have 200,000, inducements. That's not a bad thing to have to go into a match as well. You can get at least one good star player, and possibly, star player and or Merc.
And
so,
and I think that's all valid, 100%. But I think the other kind of thing as to draft or not to draft, and I think this is potentially why, Chris, you've potentially drafted yours, is do you enjoy playing that team?
There's a narrative thing, isn't there? Because I quite like the narrative of my team. Which sounds stupid. It's sort of the Dungeon Master D&D player in me that quite likes the kind of backstory behind the team that I've got, and what are they doing and why are they doing it, and things like that. And and that I think is kind of a key. It can be a kind of key thing if that's sort of something that appeals to you in the game. I think it maybe makes redrafting more appealing. My redraft situation is a little bit different to both of yours in that you are both redrafting teams from season 7. My team that I am redrafting are from season 6, so they missed season 7. I gave them a break and then I'm bringing them back. Now, it's a point that I've had discussions with people before. A key thing to remember is that you pay 20,000 per player you redraft per season that they played, not per season that has passed. So I'm still only paying as much per player as you two are, but you two are bringing back Tom. You're bringing back about 7 players. Scott, you're bringing back 4 players. I'm only bringing back 2. Also starting with 1.3 as my budget. But my kind of stock £1 million lizard build is 6 Saurus, 4 Skinks, 1 Chameleon, 2 rerolls, job done. It's kind of my go-to. Instead, I sort of looked at this as, I've got some players with some skills that I can bring back. Some of them were random skills that actually I wouldn't have picked. I wouldn't have picked Leap on any of my Skinks. It's an absolute waste on a stunty player. So most of them was like, no, not really worth it. So I looked at it and I thought, well, actually, I can start this season with a Croxagore. I can start this season with a sub. I can start this season with 3 rerolls and an APOC, and I can still bring back 2 choice players to kind of get the ball rolling. So it's not always. I think people assume that when you redraft, I think the assumption is you redraft and therefore you got to bring as many players back as possible. When actually, I've seen a lot of occasions where people bring back 1, maybe 2, but just enjoy the fact that they've got 1.3 to spend and not 1 million, which does still put you in the problem place, Scott, that you mentioned with giving away inducements, because my team value is I think the most expensive on the list at the minute at 1250. So I'm going to be giving away to new coaches 250 minimum.
And redrafts.
And to some redrafts, I'm giving away a lot as well. So I guess that's the kind of the issue with the redraft is how. So you touched on this, Scott. At what point do you stop redrafting? And I've got a particular team that I'm going to use as an example from our league. Only redrafted 2 players, team value 1120. So, and this is the 5th season, I believe, that this team has been playing. So they are only bringing back 2 players, but these 2 players both have 4 skills and have both played in 4 seasons. So these are 2 Beastman runners that will have cost 204. One's a Beastman runner, one's a chosen blocker, 240k and 250k. So just to bring back those 2 players is nearly 500k of the budget immediately gone. So when you look at the rest of the team, 2 rerolls, APOC, only 11 players, it's not going to be, other than 2 superstars, it's not actually going to be that different to a brand new start of season Chaos Chosen build. So where do you stop? How many seasons do you give them?
Personally, Tom mentioned it earlier as well. We can talk here about numbers. We can talk here about the costs. We can talk about whether it's 20k per season versus the cap and what makes economical sense. And you can look at the return on investment and all that good stuff. I think also it comes down to a bit of the emotional content. Tom mentioned the word enjoyment. If you enjoy a particular style of team, if you have spent and invested a lot of emotional time, which we know this coach has, on these 2 players, and they are a bit of shall we say, standout figures and standout players within actually the last several seasons.
Within
So
the
they are
league, they
known
are
across
legends,
all of the
aren't they?
teams as well.
Yeah, they are
They are legendary
superstars
status,
within the league.
Yeah, they can't walk down the street of to the local gaming store without getting mobbed. That's how famous they are. So I think it's getting much to that point of trade-off. Me personally, I think the economics come in terms of at what point and how much does it cost versus how long would it take to acquire all of those skills as well. And are you putting too many eggs in one basket? Because of course, for this example, you've got two players. Yeah, you've got one APOC, but it's only going to take one block dice. So it's going to take one POW, it's going to take one good armor roll, and it's going to take one injury roll and one failed APOC roll, and then they're gone. And it does happen. This is Blood Bowl. This is why we love it. So for me, 2-3 seasons would be the max I'd ever think about redrafting. That's my personal take anyway. What about you, Tom? Are you thinking of bringing the vampires back anytime in the future at all?
Maybe. I've been looking up on how other people have now been playing them. So watch this space. But kind of to bring it back and to kind of give that example that you've just given, Chris. So one of the actual players is a formidable beast called Nanny. Okay, this player now has, so it's a beastman runner, so it naturally has horns, but it now has block, mighty blow, tackle, claws, plus a plus on the movement, so it's movement 7. And that's only coming in at 160k. And I'm just strolling through star players trying to see what you would potentially get equivalent, and they're all well above like 190 to get close to that. So it is a bit of a bargain on a bit of a continuous one.
Yeah, you've paid that tax, haven't you, at the start? But you pay that one off at the start. You're not paying that for every game. So
Absolutely.
then, 80k to retain a player that you would probably quite comfortably say is a star, and is actually, I think, only one skill away from actually genuinely being a star. Stat-wise, that player over the 4 seasons that it has played has 4 touchdowns, 1 completion, but 40 casualties over those seasons. Absolutely kind of legendary, terrifying player. Yeah, I guess you kind of build and retain stars. It would make it all the more if that, I know that this coach is going to redraft this team until that player is at like star level, until it is absolutely maxed out. And there's a weird part of me that would love to see it dead on the ground, but part of me wants to see it get to that point. I'm so torn because I've lost players to Nanny. I have had players injured at Nanny's hand, but I would love to see it become a star. And I guess that's something that all of us in the league have this extra investment in a player that is not on any of our teams because it's been redrafted. So again, from that kind of like league narrative point of view, it maybe gets you invested in what else is going on in the league more, because you get players returning and you get these kind of legendary figures within the league who you can kind of keep an eye on.
And then if you just look at Nanny as an example and confirm, so Nanny has got horns. So he's got, first of all, horns. So that's going to be it doesn't really matter, because if he's got claws, it's always 8, isn't it, in terms of the break armor?
Yeah, but blitzing with strength 4.
So blitzing with strength 4, you're going to be breaking armor on an 8, and of course then you've still got mighty blow. So can you apply mighty blow to the 8? So for example, would you be breaking armor on a 7? You can't.
I believe you use one or the other, but you can use mighty blow to break armor on an 8, and then you can use claws to break armor on an 8, and then mighty blow to injure on a 9.
So if you look at that, then just put that in the stats. Statistically, if you are breaking armor on an 8, then that's 42% chance of achieving that. So that's just over a 1 in 2. If then you, as with that mighty blow, which basically means you've got to roll a 9. So that's a 1 in 3, a 30% chance that you're getting rid of somebody off that pitch, and not just on a KO, but you're going to be possibly rolling, a 10, 11, or a 12. They're good odds in terms of if you're blitzing with Nanny and then just use everything else as cannon fodder. That's a very, very strong way statistically of clearing that pitch. So then the question is, how much is that worth to you in terms of the statistical odds of getting a successful casualty, or the emotional return, or both?
Because I would look at R3. If I was looking at R3 teams that, as we're all redrafting, we've all got different redraft kind of setups, and we all achieved different things in the last season with these teams and in our last season in general. And if I'm looking at the 3 of our teams, if you just offered me all 3 and said which one do you want to pick up for your first season, I would probably take Tom's Humans, because there's more skills across the board. Do I think that Tom's roster is, because of those redrafted skills, better than mine or yours, Scott? I definitely wouldn't say it's worse. I don't think any of our rosters are worse than any of the others. But would I say that bringing back his 7 is better than the 4 that you have brought back? I don't know if I would. Would I say that me redrafting and starting a season with Lizards with 3 rerolls and an APOC, I think that puts me in a strong enough position without needing the players. So it's interesting that there are 3 different approaches, and I wouldn't necessarily immediately sit here and say one of us has a obvious edge over the other.
True. I have a question then for both of you gentlemen. I know, Chris, you're usually the host with the most, but
no, go for it. Let me have a lie back. I'll chill.
I have a couple of questions actually for both of you. When you started your first season, or if you started a season with a vanilla team of 1 million draft, how would you feel playing against, say, a 1.2 million with a lot of skills?
That's a great question.
So if you turn it the other way around, we've all talked about way of redrafting. Chris, you're 1.25. Tom and myself, I think we're about just under 150, 170, something like that. So how would we feel if you're only a million, say, versus 1.2? Would you be worried? Would you be excited because you can maybe play different things? Would you feel different if you were an experienced coach with 1 million versus someone, if this is your first season, you've never played Blood Bowl before, and you've got 1 million and you're playing this team who have got lots of other skills?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I was actually going to ask and mention that. But is it demoralizing to the opposition if they're coming in with a brand new team? So very similar, because looking at it, 9 out of the current 22 that have registered for the next league have redrafted. So it's nearly half the amount have redrafted. So it's going to be highly likely that the people who are bringing new teams are going to be in a division with some of these redrafted teams.
I think as a new coach, I think you shouldn't be scared coming up against a redrafted team, because I think you are coming up against whether that coach redrafted or not. Scott, let's take you as an example. Your first season, you played Rats. And in the second season, you played Rats, but you didn't redraft. You brought just a brand new Rat team. And I would say that a new coach coming in and playing you should be arguably as scared, if not more, than if they're playing a team that redrafted, because
he's a current definite Demon champion.
Well, there's that. There's that. All hail, praise down. But you will be playing a team that you have had a season with. You know how they play. You have had practice in how they play, and you are used to a certain way to play them. Probably, you've got you are possibly on somewhat of a roll, and got some momentum, even though you haven't redrafted. That, alongside the fact that you didn't redraft, so your team value is going to be similar, and your opponent is not going to get any inducements against you. If you play someone who's redrafted, there is still that momentum, but at least you're then possibly getting 100, 150, 200 plus to back your team up. So you're up against the same thing, but you can level the playing field a little bit better. So when I played Skaven in season 5, I was in a group against a redrafted Norse team that came third the previous season. Mighty blow and block everywhere. Absolutely terrifying roster. I had enough inducement money that I could effectively just hire mercenaries and star players for no other reason than to be cannon fodder on my front line so that my players didn't die. And I put up a good fight. I didn't win either of the games against this coach, but I put up a better battle than I thought, and I didn't lose as many players as I thought I would because I kind of used the inducements as a bit of a shield. And I actually think, with all the block that he would have had regardless as a Norse coach, if we had the same team value, I might have struggled more because I wouldn't have been able to protect my players as much. So I think the inducement system gives you enough that it can be intimidating. I think it would look intimidating. I think coaches will be intimidated, but I think they should take some kind of some positivity and some kind of some hope in the fact that actually, yeah, you may be up against a massively high value team with a really experienced coach. However, I don't know, take Bomber, take Cindy, take something to really throw their game off, and give them a different challenge. And we have had seasons where no redrafted team has made it into the final 8. So it's not a guaranteed pass.
And what you just said there is a great point, really. Of you get to, regardless of your experience with Blood Bowl, say you're brand new to Blood Bowl. Yes, it can look very daunting. You come in with a brand new team, and you've set it all up, and then all of a sudden you're up against some phenomenal team. But then it gives you the option. It gives you experience and understanding of how other the other dynamics of Blood Bowl works. How do you get star players? What are your inducements? All of that kind of play. And equally, if you take out one of those star players, someone please take out Nanny. If you kill one of those beloved players, your status within the community goes up tenfold anyway.
It's a legendary action, isn't it?
It is. Yeah,
it is. I then have another question for you both, gentlemen. We've talked then about this potential disparity between a redrafted team with a number of skills and core assets versus a new team who does have access to a pool of inducements. We've also talked about, there can be, disparity between the skill and the expertise of the coach. Where you have a league which has been going for several years, you will naturally therefore get an imbalance between number of teams which are going to be redrafted versus not. And the one stat I'd like to come back and we'll talk about, you mentioned that we've got 9 out of 22 so far participants redrafting for season 8 ADBBL. What was season 7? What was season 6? But my question for you is, should league organizers and event organizers ever think of doing a season where it's just a complete reset? So just an open question, Chris and Tom, for ADBBL, which is our local league, Aardvarks and Dragons Blood Bowl League. If you're ever in the Woodbridge, Suffolk area, get yourself down to Aardvarks and Dragons for all of your tabletop gaming needs, and free hugs and smiles and wonderful affection from the owner, Mr. Scott Phipps. The question is, should we get, say, to season 10, 11 or 12, and everybody starts with a team, 1 million skills as per the box?
That's an interesting one, because I originally thought that the only way you could redraft a team is if they played in the previous season. So the question maybe is that to league organizers and stuff is, again, put in the chat, send us an email, on all the channels you'll see later on, is, do you put those kind of rules in? Do you say you can only redraft a maximum of 3 times, or you have to redraft them in subsequent times? Because, you know, when we get to Arvarks and Dragons 75, you know, and Scott brings back his Skaven team from season 6, you know, it gets a bit ridiculous, doesn't it? It is that kind of scenario, isn't it? How is the cutoff point, I suppose?
So I know that there are leagues out there that I've got friends who play in who do not allow redraft at all, and don't allow it at all. There are local leagues to us. The Ipswich Bloodbowl League will allow you to redraft a team from a different league, which we won't, which the Aardvarks League won't allow. It has to be from Aardvarks. So I think there is kind of some variation on how people generally view it. As far as like, would I, as a league commissioner, do a hard reset? I don't think I would, because thinking back at previous seasons, season 4 champion was not a redrafted team. Season 4 champion was not a redrafted, and I think was the only team in the top 4 that, or maybe there were 2 teams in the top 4 that weren't redrafted and 2 that were. But yeah, that was won by a team that didn't redraft. Season 5 was won by a team, I believe, that didn't redraft. Season 7 was won by a team that didn't redraft. So it's not a guaranteed ticket to the final by any stretch. And I think you know, the inducement system the Blood Bowl has allows each individual game to be balanced in what, you know, to a degree. So I don't know if I would do a hard reset, but I do think that you do have to. I do think it's worth keeping an eye on it, and that leagues shouldn't. I don't think every league should just follow the book. I think it does work to follow the book, but I think actually you don't want to scare coaches off. You know, if we ended up with the same 32 coaches playing for 5 seasons in a row, and then you wanted to bring someone new in and everyone was bringing 5-seasoned-old teams, I would probably change my view, because you want to be welcoming to other people. And you don't want to close off by only allowing teams that have always been there to be the ones involved. At the moment, though, it happily doesn't look like that, because, you know, redrafted teams do well, but don't always win.
I think you're quite right. I think locking it down so you don't redraft just takes away an extra dynamic, and giving people the freedom to choose whether or not they do. I think that is definitely very thematic for our league, especially because we've got those little in-house stories about certain teams, certain players. You know, we've got coaches, that have never redrafted in the league. We've got others who have always only ever played that one team. I know one, for example, is an Orc team. He's bringing back 1, 2, 3, 4 of his redrafted team, and as far as I'm aware, he's only ever played Orcs. So I think that's great. I think that's really good fun. And equally, the fact is that the actual rules have been done in such a way that although it can look quite scary, as we've just said, going up against one of these redrafted or multi-redrafted teams, it balances it out by allowing you that extra inducements and playability, and it's not, as you quite rightly put, Chris, a sure bet that you're going to go right through and win the game, win the league.
So before we bring redraft to a close, I don't think we're going to come up with a should you or shouldn't you. I think it's such an open thing. But what would be if there was one tip you could give a coach considering the redraft, what's your one tip, Scott?
when you decide which players you are going to redraft, don't just redraft everything you have that has a skill. So, for example, and I know, Chris, we were having a conversation about this before, if you have, let's say, a lineman with kick, should you bring that player back, or is it a skill you are prepared to wait for? So again, my recommendation is, first of all, do you enjoy playing that team? Because if you don't enjoy playing it, stop, don't bother. There's the first thing. Don't, to use the phrase, flog the dead horse. But if you do enjoy that team, if it's something you really want to do as well, again, think about, what do you want? Do you want to just bring, is your need, I want to play with these players because they have a lot of SPP and they have so much fun playing? You know, is there a particular skaven, like a gutter runner you play with, who has sprint, sure feet, sidestep, block, everything, etc.? And is it fun to play with? Or is there a particular skill set that you want? So if you know that you're playing into a bash heavy league, you want to keep one of your players with kick. So you have that ability to start maybe managing the game a bit more. So my recommendation is, if you are going to redraft, do it for your right reasons. Make sure you're enjoying playing the team, and then make sure you have the right, you choose the players with the right skills. Don't just choose players with skills.
Tom?
Yeah, I'd echo what Scott said.
No. You got to think of something on your own now, Tom.
Yeah, I was going to say, the first number one rule is, do you enjoy playing them? You know, I had a vampire team which actually got some quite good skills, but I was beat up with them. I just couldn't play them at all. I could have redrafted them last season and tried my best with them, but I was done with them. So that's the number one thing. Do you enjoy playing with them? Because you're going to play this team through a league. It's not just a tournament. It's several weeks or whatever you're going to be playing them. The second thing I would do is look at what the skills are and see whether you're going to enjoy playing with those skills as well. So, for example, one of the players I've got is a thrower with Fumbaruski. I've redrafted him, and you're like, what on earth are you doing? You know, that's a bizarre skill. You're wasting a lot of money and everything.
Love that skill.
I love it. I find it hilarious. I just a little bit of fun for me, kind of thing. So think about how you want to play. I've done it all the way. I've learned the hard way to say, play against your player. You know, what's everyone else got? And with tour play, it's a horrible thing. It's on the internet 24/7, and you can see what potential participants have got, your rivals have potentially got, and you can overthink it to the nth degree. But if you're comfortable with it, go with it. And the final thing for me is, if you learn and know what those skills do. I've learned the hard way, where I've had certain skills and I haven't fully read up on what they can do, and I haven't used them to their full potential.
What are your top tips there, Chris? What would you say to that?
I think you guys have covered everything. I think I said, what is your one top tip? And you both have given me about 6, which is great. It's very intensive. I would say that I think everyone plays Blood Bowl for a different reason. And I think I would say, don't be afraid to make the narrative choice over the practical one. Because I personally get just as much fun by looking at players and thinking, like, narratively, do they need a final hurrah? You know, and I didn't redraft. So I played Lizards in season 3, redrafted them for season 4. I didn't redraft them into season 5 because in season 4 I got through to semi-finals, third place playoff, and I was like, they've gone out in a blaze of glory, and I would never, I wouldn't have today redrafted that Lizard team, because I feel like they've narratively had their end. And at the same time, I think I've got a Skaven team, which I'm not redrafting, but this Lizard team who kind of crashed out of their last season, and I want to give them I feel like there's redemption, and part of the reason I will redraft them rather than just starting again is I want them to have a redemption arc. So I would say don't be afraid if something that draws you to it is the narrative of your team. Don't be afraid to bring back the player with the stupid skill, because narratively it does it for you. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. Do what is going to make you enjoy it the most. I would love to hear from everyone else. Are you redrafting a team? Do you think people should redraft teams? Does your league redraft teams differently and have a different set of rules as to what you can and can't bring back? If you want to give us any of that information, get in touch. And Scott, how is it people would do that?
People can get in touch with us many ways. They can email us, newdiceplease, that's all lowercase, all one word, newdiceplease@gmail.com, and we will answer. Well, between the three of us, we'll eventually get round to answering
We'll get to it.
addressing it. Yeah. So don't think we don't care, because we do. And on the topic of caring and sharing, just to call out to everybody out there, our international audience, and including anyone in the UK, whether you're driving home, just calling out Mr. John Reader as well. Just eyes on the road, John. Make sure you're a safe distance from the car in front. Want to get home in one piece. Sorry, just something mentioned earlier. If people want to watch us, Tom, where do they else go listen to us and watch us, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have our YouTube channel, Bloodbowl Live, which is where you can see us here. Hello, in visual as well as audio. We are on all the podcast channels under New Dice Please, and also we potentially will at some point, just like replying to emails, actually post something on Instagram under Bloodbowl Live as well.
I promise we are in control. We do have some. We have some handle on all this in some way, shape, or form. I promise you. Thank you very much, Scott. Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. We have been New Dice Please, and we will see you next time.